Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles.
Chase Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got it.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to be great and dominate.
Well, all right. Happy New Year. Did you miss us? Operation Domination back in the building. As always, I'm your host, Dan Mader, joined here with the full crew tonight. We got Chase Thornton and Adam LaRue. Make sure you download Operation Domination on your favorite podcast app and check out our video content when you go to the Fantasy Football Advice Network YouTube channel at FF Advice Net. It is playoff time. It is Black Monday. Lots of things going on in the NFL, but we're going to focus in a little bit here because we got all offseason to talk about a lot of these things going on right now, and everything's still very, very raw, especially in terms of the coaching staff. Last week, we talked about our 2025 season fantasy football awards, so we got a nice little recap to the season. So what we're going to be doing through the playoffs, still focusing on the DFS Cocktail Hour. We want to get you some drinks, and we want to try to win some tournaments out there. And we'll talk about some of these football players are still playing in the playoffs, but we're also going to be getting a jump start on our Dynasty content as we go Dynasty Offseason here. So half and half throughout the year. Don't worry. I'm still going to line your pockets green because I'll be coming back with episodes with Chaz Flaherty of Sports Betting Weekly. He'll talk about some of his bets. I'll talk about some of my props. We'll talk about the playoffs then. So make sure you stay tuned for that too. Okay, with that, let's get started with a drink.
Hills, yeah, let's get it kicked off with a drink here. It's playoff time, everybody. Time to get excited again about watching football. If your team's out of it, you can at least be excited that you get to watch some decent football for a while. And if your team is still in it, good on you and congratulations, you made it this far. Some of us are limping into the playoffs, Green Bay. But hey, let's try and win some money and look at some things. We're going to start off with that Green Bay game actually this week. Remember, there's a limited slate because it's the playoffs. There's 6 games. We've got 2 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday, a game on Monday. We are going to look at all of them. We're going to use the entire 6-game slate. That is an option on DraftKings. You can also split it up by days and everything else that they do, but we're going to look at all 6 games as a whole here. So everything is available to us that's on the slate, and we're going to kick it off with that Green Bay game and Chicago Bears now. And you might be a little bit surprised that the Packer fan, the Homer Packer fan, is actually going to go on the other side of things. We're going to kick it off with Caleb Williams at quarterback for 5,600 here. He is the quarterback 8 in DraftKings salary this week, but he is your quarterback 6 in terms of your ECR rankings. You're getting to just the slightest bit of a discount on Caleb Williams there in terms of his price vis-a-vis his ranking for the week. Quarterback 7 on the year in DraftKings scoring, quarterback 10 in points per game. He had really kind of became what we all wanted Caleb Williams to, or at least showed progress towards becoming what we all wanted Caleb Williams to become from a fantasy standpoint this season. Came up short of 4,000 yards. I'm going to rub that in a little bit, Bears fans. They still have not had a 4,000 yard passer, but he was 58 yards short of it. He'll get that. He will end up being your all-time franchise quarterback when it's all said and done. I fully expect that. But we're talking about a guy with 2 touchdowns in each of his past 5 games passing. I mean, he's really had a good stretch run here. You look 2 weeks ago, it was a little bit of a weird game last week with Detroit that kind of the whole team kind of fell on their face a little bit. But 2 weeks ago against San Francisco in that banger of a game we saw then, he ended up the QB4 in DraftKings scoring that week. Threw for 330 yards there, had a really nice game. If you look at it, he has been a little bit of a volume guy this year in terms of his scoring, but this game should be plenty of volume and it should be a banger. He has 4 passing scores this season in 2 games against Green Bay. But if you look at the last couple of seasons, I mean, they were 1-1 against each other this year. The last 2 years, they're 2-2 against each other. They've actually each won a game in the other's house. Last year they split, and this year they split the opposite direction. It's been an interesting time looking at this Packer Bear rivalry here. And interestingly enough, their last win against for each of those teams came against each other. So they're both kind of, in a little bit of a slide coming into the playoffs here. But if you look at all 4 of those games, they have all been 1-score games. The Bears have kind of made a living on one score comeback type games this season, if you've paid any attention to that. And their games against the Packers have been no exception to that. If you've been watching Green Bay at all, you know that since they lost Micah Parsons, they have absolutely no pass rush. They are banged up in that secondary as well. They picked up Trevon Diggs, who was kind of silent last week, and does not excite me in any way, shape, or form necessarily, unless they can somehow catch lightning in a bottle like they have with some other cast-offs in the past. But Caleb Williams, 3 rushing touchdowns as well on the season. He's got a little bit of equity that way. This is a game that I expect to be close. I expect it to be close all the way to the end. It's right in the middle of the slate in terms of the Vegas point total, but it does have it's tied for the closest point spread. Right now, it's only about a 1.5 difference. And depending on, honestly, which site you look at, it's, flip-flopping whether the Packers or the Bears are expected to win this thing. So I expect this to be a close game like they all have between them the last 2 years. I expect Caleb Williams to come out slinging and throwing that ball. He has a high value per dollar versus his projections this week, and so I'm happy to go with Caleb Williams at 5,600 at quarterback. We're going to pair him with the guy who I believe has become his top wide receiver in Luther Burden. Now, Colston Loveland has been a great play the last couple of weeks as well at tight end. If you want to pay for Colston Loveland and take that shot, I don't blame you at all. He's been absolutely amazing. But Luther Burden over the last month has kind of blossomed into that player that we were hoping he would be. He's been a top 10 wide receiver in DraftKings points per games here over that last month or so, including a monster career day versus San Francisco in that game 2 weeks ago. By the way, he kicked that hot month off with one of his better receiving games of the season against the Packers. He caught 4 of 6 passes for 67 yards, didn't get in the end zone. But remember, he missed the last game they played against Green Bay as well, and that game was close. So I expect them to be using Luther Burden a lot here. Packers give up the 14th most points to the wide receiver position. They are a little bit vulnerable there. I know Rome Odunze is expected to be back, but he's been out long enough. And honestly, I think that you can't. If I'm Ben Johnson, I'm not trying to put Luther Burden back in the bottle. I expect that to impact DJ more, in my opinion, honestly, more so than Burden. And if anything else, it might affect Loveland in the red zone maybe a little bit, because Rome Odunze is kind of a big shot play, and he's a big, tall guy that they can go to in the red zone as well. So I am happy to go with Caleb Williams at 5,600. I'm happy to go with Luther Burden at 4,600. He's only the wide receiver 20 in DraftKings salary this week, but he is your wide receiver 8 in terms of your ECR ranking this week. You're getting a major discount on Luther Burden. I like him for a play this week, especially coming into a bounce back, what I think could be a bounce back game for him after last week. So we're going to go ahead. I'm going to start to mix up this drink here, but I am going to toss it to Dan and Adam here. I want to know, what are your thoughts here about going with a Bears stack here, or is there anybody else at receiver and quarterback that you guys are looking for as well that we can give the folks out there and try and win them some money here?
Well, I know I personally can't argue with it too much, because I do have Caleb Williams and Luther Burden both in my lineups here. It's the fact of the price tag that we're talking about. Caleb Williams 5,600. Luther Burden at 4,600. It's too low for two guys that have the pop potential to be in the top 5 or even higher in their respective positions for this week. And then they're at that price tag. So when you're trying to find some way to stack up some of these higher end players and you can still have quality guys around them, that's where they come in. Plus, the Packers defense is not the same Packers defense by Micah Parsons. It's plain and simple. It's just not. I'll take it one further. I got to line up with those two and Kyle Monangai at 5,200 in my lineup as well, as I think the Bears will still come out and play their thunder and lightning with DeAndre Swift and Monangai. I like Monangai for a touchdown this week too. But here's some other values I got for you. Or actually, no, I'm going to lead off with this, Chase. There are certain guys that have to be in my lineup this week. Puka Nacua has to be in my lineup this week, even though he's $8,700. Saquon Barkley has to be in my lineup this week, even though he's $7,000. George Kittle has to be in my lineup this week at $6,200. The Texans have to be my defense this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers at $3,300. So when I put all those pieces together, it kind of maps out nicely what the rest of my team is going to wind up being. So what are some of the sleepers around that? Because those are the names everybody knows that you're going to want to try to pack into your lineup. I'm looking at guys like Kayshon Boutte at the wide receiver position, who's been known to pop a big play. He's back in the lineup full throttle and healthy. He's at $4,300 for the Patriots. And then your guy, who I can't believe you haven't mentioned yet, but Christian Watson, $4,900 with Jordan Love back against the Chicago Bears, who can't cover anything. That's talk about a big play waiting to happen type of guy. That kind of fills out a lineup there for me. So that's kind of what I'm looking at overall. Notice what teams I didn't have in there. Notice what matchups I didn't attack too hard. There's a lot of matchups I think this weekend we're going to see that aren't going to put up too many points. These are the few matchups: the Bears, the Packers, the Eagles, the 49ers. I think the Chargers and Patriots are a sneaky little overplay as far as the total in that game is concerned. These are the games that I'm kind of looking for, especially in DFS lineups this week. I don't know. Adam, what are you seeing?
Yeah, no, I not only do I see those matchups all the same way, Christian Watson was the first name that was outside of Chase's list, and I was like, we got to talk about Christian Watson. So I'm definitely there with you. And the other name that I guess add to that is Juwan Jennings, who has been pretty awesome in the red zone the second half of the season since Brock Purdy has gotten back, and I think is a pretty solid value. But him and then the names that you mentioned, I think are some of the best pairings with what Chase has for us.
No, I definitely have Christian Watson. I actually had him as a playback against this Bear stack that I have at 4,900. Yeah, you can't go wrong with the price tag there. Plus, remember in that first game against Chicago, he did have two passing or receiving touchdowns out of 4 catches there. He's a monster, value, I believe, this week as well. So I agree with you on that as well. Dan, did you have anything you wanted to respond to Adam there?
No, not at all.
No, I agree with you about the matchups you're attacking there as well. I like all of those suggestions. I'm not going to necessarily argue with any of those. So I've mixed up the first half of my drink here. We're going with a drink this week called the cream of the crop, because the cream of the crop, as the late great Macho Man Randy Savage says, rises to the top. Well, here we are at the end of the fantasy season. Hopefully you rose to the top, and the top teams in the NFL have risen and are now in the playoffs here. So we're going with the cream of the crop. It's kind of a variation on a pina colada here is basically what it is here. So I've gone with an ounce of coconut rum, an ounce of white rum, a half ounce of pineapple juice, and because it's the cream of the crop, a half ounce of cream of coconut. And I have done that in a shaker full of ice. You could blend this if you wanted as well for a frozen, kind of tropical drink there. Basically that's how you make a pina colada. But I have shaken that up here. And then to that, I'm going to add 2 ounces of sparkling white wine. This is actually Moscato d'Asti from the good folks at Stella Rosa. It's one of the wines that we had at our wedding, actually. So I'm going to add that in there as well, and I'm going to stir that up. But while I do that, I'm going to tell you about the other 2 players that I like in my lineup this week, in addition to some of the guys that Dan talked about here. Travis Etienne from the Jacksonville Jaguars there is a 6,600 this week. He's the running back 4 in terms of DraftKings salary and in ranking this week. He's been a top 10 guy for you this year. He's been hot lately. He had a real strong fantasy playoffs for everybody out there that had him, including yours truly in my home league and others. He's actually averaged more points per game over the last 5 weeks or so than he has on the season. So he's actually even picked it up lately here, even if you count the rough game that he had last week where he didn't actually score a whole lot, even though he still had 14 carries. They won the game. They took care of business, did what they had to do, but he was averaging over 20 points a game over the previous 4 weeks behind that. So I'm still way in on Mr. Etienne there. The Bills allow the 8th most points to opposing running backs. They are the weakest rush defense that's left in the playoffs here of any of the teams that's left. And this is a game here, Buffalo and Jacksonville, that has the highest over under on the slate at 52.5 points, depending on the book that you're looking at. But it also, like I said, is tied for the closest point spread at only 1.5 points. This is a game that should see a lot of points and shouldn't see anybody necessarily game scripted out. Etienne is a big part of what they do there. I want pieces of the high scoring, games like that. So I'm liking Etienne there at 6,600. And then, because, I kind of have to throw a bone to some people every once in a while. I have not been a Dalton Schultz guy, but I'm going to go with Dalton Schultz at tight end. I like him at 4,000 this week. He's the tight end 5 in DraftKings salary. He's picked up his game lately. He's been a top 10 option for you over the past month if you've paid attention to what they've been doing down there in Houston. He's already set a career high in receptions this season. He leads Houston in receptions this season, and he's second on the team in targets to Nico Collins. And he's also coming off his most efficient game of the season. Last week, he caught 4 passes on 4 targets for 73 yards, had a long of 32. And he's looked good. He's looked much better than I typically tend to give him credit for. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I think I told you, I didn't like him at all. I tend to like Cade Stover in terms of a player, but Schultz has been coming on as a fantasy piece lately. We're going to go with him this week. He's facing a Pittsburgh defense that has given up the 4th most points to the tight end position. They've given up the 4th most catches in the league and the 3rd highest yardage total to opposing tight ends this season. This game has the lowest point total on the slate, but Houston is favored on the road, and a big reason for that is I think they can take advantage of that matchup there in the pass game with Dalton Schultz. So we're going to go with, in terms of my core that I'm giving you, Caleb Williams, Luther Burden, Travis Etienne, and Dalton Schultz. Okay. Few more notes real quick. I'm going to agree with Dan here. I like targeting the pass catchers in Buffalo, Jacksonville as well. To be honest with you, especially on the Jacksonville side, I think this is going to be a high scoring game in my opinion. I like any Rams offensive piece you can stick in there, except for Higbee, who shall not be named because I don't ever deal with that dude. CMC is still an awesome pick, even though it's Philadelphia this week because it's Christian McCaffrey. You can afford some of these higher end pieces like Dan was talking about with Nacua and them because we saved on our Chicago stack. We paid down a little bit there. I'm paying down at wide receiver in a couple of places, which is going to allow me to spend up elsewhere if I want a piece like a Nacua, like a CMC. You have to start at least 3 wide receivers, remember. So that is where you're going to be able to separate yourself if you can hit on some of those cheaper options and allow yourself to spend up to get some of the big guns elsewhere. Like I said, CMC, I've got lineups with Kyron Williams in it. I like that. And I agree with Dan. I like the 2 higher priced defenses this week, either Houston or Los Angeles. Stack up on those guys. So I've mixed up that drink. I shook it up and then I added 2 ounces of our sparkling white wine. We're going to stir that up just to get it mixed up a little bit. And then we're going to strain that into our chilled coupe glass here again. And what you end up with is a nice little tropical, creamy, kind of a little bit frothy drink there. Like I said, I shook this. You could blend it if you wanted to. That's going to make it even more summery in my opinion. But you can garnish that with any kind of fruit you want. If you want to put, a wedge of pineapple on that, if you want to put a wheel of orange on it, like I just did there. If you want to get real Martha Stewart about the whole thing and put some edible tropical flowers, you go ahead and be my guest, but that's hard to come by in Northwest Wisconsin in the middle of January. So I did not go the edible tropical flower route. I'm just going to get to this drink. Good luck, everybody, for the teams you're cheering for. Good luck winning some money. Slàinte. I'm going to refresh myself here.
No, I like it. I like it. It's good that you're refreshing yourself because it's time for us to get a little temperature check.
Hot air, so hot in here.
All right. So an interesting one on the temperature check today. We're going to talk about, go around and just talk about some players who, their situations could be interesting next season. Might be better, might be worse than they were this last season. And we're gonna go through it and see, are these guys sells over the offseason? Are they guys who you could potentially get on your waivers right now? Or are they guys who you could buy early in the offseason and make some profit, I guess, once it comes March free agency around that time? So first off, let's start with probably the biggest one, the one that could make you the most value. It's Malik Willis, who obviously back up for the Green Bay Packers right now. And I think a lot of people, with how dreadful the quarterback class currently is, and with that potentially getting worse, it still feels like outside of Mendoza, everyone else is a question mark in terms of whether they even come out. Chambliss had this great game a few days ago, and people are like, all right, maybe he's our new QB3. And then suddenly he's like, I'm trying to come back and fight the NCAA for next year of eligibility. And if that doesn't give you a sense of where this quarterback class is going, then I don't know what to tell you. So at any rate, Malik Willis, it seems like the musical chairs. If there's only so many options, then he's probably going to be one of the beneficiaries. And we've seen him get an opportunity before. It wasn't great. He has kind of reinvented himself with the Packers, and rushing guy who has made some explosives through the air lately. I mean, Chase, you're the closest to this of all of us. What do you think if he's to get an opportunity, say, I mean, with the Jets and Garrett Wilson, or with any of these teams really who are looking for a quarterback next season, other than I think we can probably assume the Raiders are going to get their guy through the draft. But outside of them, kind of everywhere else is open.
As a Packer fan, I love Malik Willis. It's been so nice the last 2 seasons not to have to worry about the backup quarterback position. That said, when they signed him originally, I was pretty worried about things because he was so beyond the pale in Tennessee, but that's Tennessee, and they haven't necessarily, shot the lights out in terms of their quarterback development lately. I'm hoping Cam Ward can buck that trend a little bit. He looks like he's come on the last month or so, but Malik Willis, I think, ended up in a perfect position for him. He ended up going to a place where he was not expected to be, to have a ton of stress on him. He went to a place with Matt LaFleur and an offensive system that I think they could develop him. They could teach him how to play the position much better than he was getting in Tennessee. And then, like you said, he's kind of running into the perfect storm of an offseason here where he has elevated his stock over the last 2 seasons and looked good lately, even doing it. And he's running into a draft class, the quarterback draft class that is, shall we say, less than stellar. And so there is going to be option. And we just saw in this past offseason a bunch of my reclamation projects that I am always, waving the, the banner for. We saw this year guys like Sam Darnold, guys like Daniel Jones, who came into good situations and were able to keep their game elevated and actually elevate the teams that they went to as well. Malik Willis, I think, can be that kind of guy, but I think he needs to go to the right situation. I think he needs another offensive-minded coach with a good, offensive system and with a reputation for quarterback, mastery. Honestly, I think Minnesota wouldn't be a terrible, situation for him in terms of going over there and being that they've talked about maybe bringing in a veteran presence to compete with JJ McCarthy for next season. I don't think that would be a bad place for him to go. Like you said, there are other places that are going to have quarterback openings. I'm just not sure if I'm Malik Willis that I want to be too. I mean, I don't want him to bet on himself too much. I want him to make sure that he picks the right situation. He might not find a better situation for his own personal development than Green Bay, but I definitely don't want him to go somewhere where there's there's no quarterback development system in place or no chops in that regard. So for Malik Willis, I mean, in Dynasty, we talk about it all the time that most of us are in Superflex Dynasty leagues. I'm hanging on to him unless I get somebody that's super hopped up, at least for right now. Once his situation shakes out, I'll be more apt to want to make concrete decisions on selling or buying based on where he goes. But I think he really needs that he needs to find another crucible just like he found here in Green Bay. Do you guys have any idea where you think that might be for him, where he's going to be able to find that same kind of support?
Dan, I'll kick it to you first because I know you've been had some reactions to what both of us have said.
Well, so first of all, I'll say is that sounded to me like a Packers fan who doesn't want to give up his backup quarterback.
No, I do not. For one,
both of your backup quarterbacks, by the way, are going to be the 2 guys.
Yes, please.
100%. That's
we'll
what it's.
Put that in a universe. Damn you.
Malik Willis is going to be 27 years old. So if he doesn't go after a starting position now, he may never get one. He's at that cusp in his career. So whatever opens the door to him, he's going to probably take. I think we're hyping him up way too much as it is to begin with. Look, his last game in which he, blew everybody away because they hit the big bombs, right? And it was super uber efficient. He had 21 pass attempts. That's the most pass attempts he has had at any point in time that he has started for Jordan Love as a Green Bay Packer. So I do that to illustrate the point of when he's come in, he's been on a good team who's done everything in their power to him not lead the offense. It's been leaning on the defense and the running game. He's looked better than what he was in Tennessee in doing so 100%. But there's a lot of question marks as what it looks like Malik Willis is really your starter and the offense has to flow through him. Adam, to your point, there are about what I calculated 7 teams that I think are going to need a quarterback next year, or like really need one. The Raiders, Jets, Browns, Vikings, Cardinals, who I have an asterisk for, Dolphins, Steelers, Colts. And I have asterisks for Cardinals, Dolphins, Steelers, Colts because obviously those quarterback situations are fluid. Daniel Jones could return to the Colts. Aaron Rodgers may decide not to retire and stay with the Steelers. Who knows? Or he may go. The Dolphins seem like they want to cut ties with Tua Tagovailoa. I don't know how they pull that off with the contract situation that they have, but it seems like that's something that's what they want to do. And the Cardinals kind of the same boat as the Dolphins. To me, the only team that Malik Willis can do what he does is to go back to Arthur Smith and the Pittsburgh Steelers and relive this whole nightmare scenario all over again. But that's honestly what I see. Kevin O'Connell doesn't want a quarterback like Malik Willis. He wants a quarterback who can actually read the field. That's not Malik Willis's game. We don't know who the head coach of the Browns are going to be. The Jets just went through with Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor. I don't think they're looking for a similar type of quarterback again in that veins. The Raiders, again, we don't know who the coach is going to be. Cardinals are a mess. I don't think they're going to go in a direction where you get an even worse passer than Kyler Murray, who's a run-first guy. So I don't see a lot of openings outside of potentially the Steelers. And no matter what happens with Malik Willis, whatever opportunity he does get, it will be in a competition based. It will not be giving him the job outright. So as far as the dynasty question of it all, Adam, I don't look at Malik Willis as some asset that I need to get my hands on because it may be all for naught, even if he gets a starting opportunity.
What do you think that there's upside there, though? Do you think that, say,
not really.
All right, fair enough.
Not really. He runs, and everyone's going to harp on him running. How is he going to be different than Justin Fields this past season? I have not seen enough for him on a Green Bay. If you're going to tell me he's going to be on a team like the Green Bay Packers, which is a playoff loaded team, sure, different conversation. I don't see that being in the cards between the teams that need a quarterback and what he's going to have to do to become a starter.
Sometimes when we ask about, do you see upside here? We're talking about there's a difference between upside on the field and upside in fantasy. But I tend to agree with you here, Dan, that I don't necessarily see a ton of upside for him in either situation. Like I said, if he goes to the right situation in this offseason, I will make more decisions on whether to sell him or buy him. I probably won't be buying him in a whole lot of places, but if he goes to a place where I can maybe get somebody hopped up and sell him, that's the opportunity I see. If he becomes a starting quarterback somewhere, I don't see a ton of places, as I laid out, where he's going to go and really be able to be the player that, like you said, Dan, I think everybody has tried to hype him up as being this last month or so. When 23 passes is your career high in a game, and that came 3 years ago in Tennessee when you were absolutely terrible, you're not necessarily a high profile. You're not ready for prime time at the quarterback position. And at 27 years old, I think he should embrace the idea of being the backup quarterback or the competing quarterback. I don't want to lose him as a backup because it's been nice to not worry about the backup, but I don't see Malik Willis necessarily following the same career path as those other guys that I've been, stumping the table for.
Before we move on, and we will shortly, but before we do, let me throw one alternate scenario that we haven't really talked about yet for Malik Willis. If the Cleveland Browns are not able to draft a quarterback, and if they are able to otherwise invest their draft picks into the offensive line, that is a team where your strengths are then the defense and the running game. Kind of as we laid out is what he would want to be successful.
But here's the thing.
That doesn't take him anywhere.
What are we not even just that. What are we going to do? Bring Malik Willis in to compete with Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders? Because Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders are going to be on the roster next year. They've already talked about them competing for the job. So we're going to add Malik Willis to that mix. I don't see that being beneficial.
I don't know that it's beneficial, but I think the 2 rookie quarterbacks were the worst 2 quarterbacks in football this last season. Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders were literally the bottom 2 quarterbacks in EPA. I think that a new coach can write them off fairly easily. Sean Watson, financially, he's going to be there. I think we also know what we have there. Financially, can they afford to bring in another quarterback? I don't know.
That's kind of where I'm at. I don't know how financially they bring in a Malik Willis to compete for the job when you still have Deshaun Watson on the books.
Yeah, no, I that much is completely fair. Is it just too full of a room based on the resources you've used?
I don't see what he adds or changes to that room in terms of what they already have available to them, especially for the money that it would take to get him in there.
Candidly, none of those three could pass or use their legs. At least he could use his legs.
He couldn't either till he got to Green Bay.
100%.
And now they've got rid of Stefanski. So who are they going to bring in for an offensive support group around him? That's my hang up on that. As a Browns fan, if he could be the backup like he is in my current team, in Green Bay, then great. But I don't see a lot of great situations for him.
Yeah, the Browns is right. All right, on to our next one, and it is our other quarterback that we get to talk about, and one who I think maybe a little more optimistic right now, but how long does that last? Because we've seen this type of situation a lot of times over the course of NFL history, and it normally does not last. Mr. Tyler Shough, who has come on late in his rookie season, looked really good, has shown some flashes where I think Saints fans are really optimistic about him. I think that front office is really optimistic about him. I think that he is as close to a guaranteed week 1 starter as you could possibly expect him to be. Everything past that is a question, though, because we have seen Will Levis. We've seen all of these guys who were second-round picks. They come on late. We're like, okay, great. And then they very quickly lose their luster on their second season. So I got to ask you guys, do you think he's one of these guys? Because I think he's a very interesting case where some of it, when you really watch, does seem sustainable. Like he does read the offense more than, for example, a Will Levis did. But then on the flip side, based on his age, you'd sure hope so. So it's hard to find a real comparison for him because based on his tape, it seems like it could be sustainable based on, I guess, his draft variables, like, what we look at with him on paper, it does not look sustainable. So what are you guys seeing here? I started with you, Chase, last time. So Dan, what do you think?
Well, to your point, so let's lay out. He's going to be 27 next year. We just talked about Malik Willis turning 27. He's been in the league how many years? And Tyler Shuck's
he's a reclamation product. Shuck is like, all right, you're 2. What do we got?
Exactly. And you point out, and everyone's been excited over the last month, he has been playing better. But he put up performances against Carolina, the Jets, the Titans, and the Falcons. The only one of those 4 teams that is ranked in the top 15 in pass defense is the Falcons, and they're literally ranked 15th. So these were like less than stellar pass defenses that he was actually putting up decent numbers against. Now, he still put up the numbers. He did, in fact, look better. But before that, when he's playing against teams that are a little bit better on defense, and I'm not talking elite status here. He didn't play any Houston Texans or Denver Broncos or anything like that. Just elite status. We're talking about he wouldn't even sniff 200 yards. Shough looks like he still struggles under pressure. Now what happens next season with a quarterback who I think at best has really an average skill set, now has tape on him going into the following year on a team that's not that talented. And for the Saints, hard for them to get much more talented because they're going to be over the cap again and have the most dead cap money again in the NFL. And you can work around stuff like that to some degree, but for the Saints, they have been in this perpetual hell since Drew Brees has been there, and it's been why they've only been able to they can get a player here or a player there, but they haven't been able to just knock out a draft. And if they can't knock out a perfect 10 on a draft, this team is really in a place where it just can't get much better. So you got tape, not much promise for more resources, and I'm left with a quarterback that did some nice things against some bad defenses, but not enough for making me feel like, yeah, this is a thing moving forward. So in Dynasty right now, though, he is getting hyped up, to your point, like because he had these performances. So you have Shough. You drafted him probably in your 3rd, maybe even 4th round of your rookie drafts, depending upon, what went down there. He's absolutely a sell now. His value will not be higher than it is today, in my opinion. because I think it's only going to go down as the season moves forward, because I don't think he's the franchise guy. And next year, you're playing with dice if you're going to see if he gets values gets any better. I say sell now all the way.
Yeah.
And he's coming off of a hot stretch here. He's been a high scorer for people here in the last month. So recency bias plus, like we've said, Dynasty, if you're in a super flex, sell people, quarterbacks are gold. I agree with you that, I would be trying to shop him and see what I can get for him. I think he's their quarterback, obviously, next season, because I don't see where else they go for that. So again, you can sell people on the idea that, hey, they found their guy and he led them on a winning streak and he scored a bunch of points in the last month and a half. I agree with your points though, Dan. Do we see that continue to go forward? And Adam, you kind of referred to it too in your opening there about the idea of, we've seen kind of some of these kinds of things happen before with dudes. Is he the next guy that kind of follows in that string? So yeah, I'm shopping Shough. I'm not going to dump him off for nothing, but I think it's you can strike while the iron's hot here.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you guys. I was a very big advocate of drafting him at cost this past draft, because things like this tend to happen all the time where rookies do go on this run and get their value up for a little bit. I'd say I did get him in a good amount of spots in the third round, and I think I'm going to try to sell probably 80 to 90% of those shares. I kind of want to keep one or two because I like to gamble, but most of them I want to sell. So that if you want an interpretation of how I'm feeling, I'm kind of right there with you guys.
If he doesn't drop off, he did show a fantasy scoring skill set.
Sure.
So it's not the worst gamble
down the field a little bit. He's got some athleticism. He's tied to a head coach who really does seem to know. I was really impressed by Kellen Moore. I do think he knows what he's doing. And Olave kind of revitalized my interest in him this season. So I like those are the things that go for him a little bit where you're like, maybe, but I still think you lean on the odds being pretty dramatically against him based on, I think, a lot of what Dan and you outlined.
I would rather have all of those selling points. I would rather use those selling points against someone than have them used against me is where I would go with that.
Well, we have a pretty natural progression here to talk about Chase's favorite player, Devaughn Vele, who I think a lot of why you would be optimistic about Vele. One is the run the brief overlap that you had between Shough and Vele. And two, and I think the most important variable here is a lot of what Dan just laid out, actually. This isn't a team in a position to be replacing okay players. If you've got serviceable, you probably need to attack the real problems first before you can replace a Vele. So while most teams you'd go, all right, like probably just replace because he hasn't provided much value, I think there's a real chance that he still hangs around as your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3. Should he? No. But with the resources the Saints have, he could just survive. And this is a guy that we can actually talk about as someone who, after he got hurt, very may well have ended up on dynasty waivers. So it's not necessarily a guy that you're trading more than, say, a fourth or some fab for. It's not like we're talking about real picks or anything exceptionally valuable for someone like Vele. So Chase, since I know you love this guy and have for a while now, got to go to you first. What do you think about the guy? At cost. I think it's an interesting name.
If you want to look at him at cost, I guess I could maybe be persuaded to take a flyer on him. But here's the thing. I mean, we're talking about him as having, kind of shown us something this season. And he actually, outside of the one game against Miami, he really didn't do a whole hell of a lot this season either. I mean, he had a touchdown against San Francisco. It was literally his only target, his only catch. He had a worse fantasy season for you this year than he did in Denver last season. And I was not a fan of him in Denver. Devaughn Vele is the kind of guy to me that kind of screams roster filler. I think if you can pick him up at cost, if you've got the space for him, he's not going anywhere because it is New Orleans. I agree with that, but I don't ever see him being anything more than the 4th or 5th option on that offense, even as currently constructed. And he's just not a guy that I think is going to crack unless you're in a crazy ass deep league or something of the stamp, or you have to start, 6 wide receivers or something like that. He's just not a guy that I think you're ever going to necessarily use much, because I don't see him having any kind of a breakout to make him any more than what he currently is. And what he currently is isn't anything that I'm excited about. So I'm off on Vele, but your point about him being, dirt ass cheap right now because he, may have been even dropped to waivers is valid. I mean, there are worse lottery tickets to take than a guy who looks like he's probably got a starting spot on somebody's offense next season. It's just not on my team.
Before we get to Dan, the argument for him would be, if you were to, is that the targets were real outside of that one game. He did get reasonable targets for a good month there, where he was in the 6 to 8 range for about a month.
Yeah, for the last month of his season. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So that would be the optimism if you wanted to look at that perspective, I guess. But Dan, what do you think about it?
Like with his quarterback, that's a selling point that I'm going to try to sell someone else on. I'm not going to let it necessarily sway my opinion in his case. But again, I am obviously biased against him. Dan, what's your thoughts on it?
That's probably a reasonable bias to have.
Yeah, I mean, so during those last 4 games that you guys were talking about, he was the wide receiver 27. He was propped up by that performance 3 weeks ago where he had 93 yards and a touchdown. This is not a guy who's ever sniffed 100 yards. This is not a guy who's ever been a dynamic player. Does he have a chance to be the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 on this team next year? Yeah, I mean, I just laid it out for you how the Saints are kind of, got their hands tied behind their back as far as being able to add weapons. And they need a lot of things. I don't know how much going after another wide receiver is going to be on the priority list. Having said that, Devaughn Vele also has a profile in which could easily be replaced by an overachieving day 3 wide receiver pick. So we also have that kind of playing into this. To me, Vele, you want him on the bench. If he's on the waiver wire, fine. Other than that, I don't really care.
That's probably a pretty valid way to look at it. Yeah, I can't disagree too much. I think he's someone who should be rostered at this time of year in Dynasty.
Oh, yeah.
But he's not someone I'm like going out of my way to buy or anything of that capacity. But certainly if you have the roster spot, I think it's worth having him around for the time being. On to our next guy, and it's another wide receiver who's in a not too dissimilar situation. That's Ryan Flournoy, who had a pretty solid season and was, I think, a little bit more interesting in the sense that when he was given full opportunities, he actually did have pop-off games. To your point on Vele not stiffing 100 yards, Flournoy had that twice, if I'm not mistaken.
He did.
He did have some really nice games there. So he is one where it just really seems like, what does this situation end up happening? Pickens, I think it's in Dallas's best interest to keep him, and I think it's in Pickens' best interest to stay. But let's face it, he's a fairly volatile guy. So would it be that crazy if he left? I don't think so. So for someone like Flournoy, who it may seem is kind of trapped behind these 2-star receivers, is he someone that you might target just on the off chance that, all right, for like a nothing pick or for like a Vele type of guy on the bottom of your bench, do you just take the swing on a Flournoy, see if you can get him on your roster instead, and see if over the course of the next couple months, by the time we hit free agency, by the time we make it through the draft, he isn't sitting pretty in a really comfortable position in Dallas on an offense that throws the ball quite a bit. Chase, what do you think?
Actually, Flournoy is the kind of guy that I am willing to take a shot on here in this, because like you said, I mean, we've actually seen him go off a couple of times now in that Dallas offense. And he's the type of guy that as a wide receiver 3 on a high volume passing team actually can show you and have some of that independent juice. Now, he's not going to be like your regular starter, but like you just said, if Pickens out somewhere and does, the unthinkable and leaves a perfect situation for himself, Flournoy could step up into that situation. I think Flournoy is what they hoped they were getting when they drafted Jalen Tolbert, but they found it in Ryan Flournoy. I like him as a flyer much more than I like the likes of Devaughn Vele here, because I think he's on a obviously better passing situation offense, but he's a guy that we've actually seen do some things. that's a guy that I am willing to take a shot on, and that I do not necessarily want to look to sell, especially if somebody's trying to sell me a bill of goods on him. Obviously they're wanting him, so I'm not going to let him go for cheap.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so I'd rather have him than Devaughn Vele. Take on that upside for sure. He's going to be 27 years old. This was his second year. He was a 6th round pick in 2024. So with that in mind, given he doesn't have a special skill set, yes, he still fits the profile of a player type who could be easily replaced with a day 2, day 3 pick, sure. But it's going to be hard for the Cowboys to keep George Pickens. They're going to be $22 million over the cap. Could they rework some contracts and get under that? Yeah, 100%, absolutely. We do expect the cap to go up again this year too, but he's going to be an expensive player. Like I don't know what you guys think, but George Pickens, in my mind, isn't going less than $28-30 million after the season that he had, given the type of player that he is and the mentality that he's got, which is
his ego won't let him take any less than that.
A wide receiver 1 type of guy, right? So can Dallas, who's already paying Dak an asinine amount, paying CeeDee Lamb, really afford to pay George Pickens here too on top of it? I don't know if that's actually plausible or not. So there's a decent chance here that Pickens is not on Dallas. Flournoy, worst case scenario, if that happens, is the wide receiver 3 on this team next year. Could be the wide receiver 2, depending on how things go. This is a pass-happy team. They could go back to CeeDee Lamb gets 170 targets in the year. Even if that happens, Flournoy still has some value, I believe, in deeper dynasty leagues because of this pass first type of team. And under Schottenheimer, while they didn't make the playoffs, I was actually impressed with the offense more so than I thought I was going to be when Schottenheimer was first hired. So I do think he's worth a flyer here. I wouldn't have huge expectations, but is this a guy come in and be a flex? Would I want to spot start him more than Vele? Yeah, I am kind of in on that boat.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair take. He's someone who could get interesting, don't want to get ahead of your skis on him. Don't want to pay too much for him. But of the sleepers we've talked about so far, probably the guy that I think is the most interesting and offers the most upside. Based on, by the way, like, the prospect profile wasn't that disinteresting as far as round guys go. He had the athleticism at the very least. It's not like a Vele where it's like, okay, you're big, but otherwise you're old and slow. Like, at least he came in, with some athleticism to speak of. And from a smaller school, it kind of made sense that he stuck around a little bit older. Speaking of an older guy, although a guy whose name we've been familiar with for a while, and Dan, I'm coming to you with this one, and I'm really curious your take. Can Mike McDaniel do it a third time? Can he revive another tight end? This one is really, really fascinating to me. Greg Dulcich came on around Halloween for the Miami Dolphins. And while he has not been their starting tight end, he's not been their primary tight end. A guy who was once a guy who we were excited about from a dynasty perspective and really, really fell off once Sean Payton got to Denver. Suddenly might have another breath of life, or at least an opportunity to get one. He's gotten, as like that second tight end, he's gotten 33 targets, like I said, since about Halloween, and 300 yards. In that time frame as a second tight end is pretty solid, if we're being honest. And especially lately, he strung together a good December, I'd say, averaging around 40, 50 yards, which again, for a tight end, it's getting like 40% of the snaps. That's really freaking solid. So again, Mike McDaniel's coming off just reviving Jonnu Smith and getting him paid. And now Darren Waller brings out of retirement and had a little stretch of real fantasy relevance for a minute there. Can he do it again with Greg Dulcich, former fantasy darling? Well, Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, this was a good name by you to bring up because it is interesting. So week 17, he had 25% target share. The weeks before that, 17%, 8%, 10%. That's all really impressive when you consider the guy never played more than 58% of the routes, which shouldn't even be on the radar, quite frankly. Dulcich did have significant draft capital for a tight end, was drafted as a talented pass catcher. And he's only going to be 26 next year. He's not that old. We're still very much in the prime length of a tight end, the beginning of the prime, in fact, for a tight end.
This being a position where like coming on late is normal.
Correct.
Not to cut you off, but like this is normal. Like it's fourth year tight end breakouts are very much so a thing.
100%. And the issue is that Greg Dulcich has never played more than 10 games in a season. Can he stay healthy? Like, I have no doubt that within this offense, I don't expect Tyreek Hill to come back. So you have Jalen Waddle, another team, yet again, that we're talking about that's over the cap, and God knows what we're doing with Tua. God knows what kind of resources they're even going to have to add weaponry. So there's a real spot here. Reason why like Jonnu got hot and Darren Waller did their thing is because they got basically boosted up the totem pole as far as where the targets go. That could easily happen to Greg Dulcich. Can he stay healthy? That's going to be the question. If he stays healthy, he is going to be that dude at the tight end. There's always one tight end every single year that you pick up off the waiver wire and explodes his way into the top 6 and winds up being a big key part in your fantasy football playoff race. Greg Dulcich is that guy. He has that profile in that situation. If he stays healthy, he's going to hit. Therefore, I want to take a shot on a guy like that.
Yeah, no, I love Greg Dulcich. I liked him in dynasty drafts his rookie season, and I have held on to him in most of the places that I took him in because I like the skill set. And like you said, Dan, it's mostly for me. It has seemed like it's always been about his health. He only played half the season this year. He only started playing in week 8, like you said. He came around Halloween, and this still was 10 games was the most he's ever played in a season. And his efficiency numbers in terms of his yards per target, his yards per catch, were the best that they've been in his career. And he barely saw the field, but when he saw the field, he was effective for them, even with the mess that they had at quarterback between Tua Tagovailoa looking like a shell of a actual quarterback, and then Quinn Ewers, who we all know I'm a giant fan of. Greg Dulcich is the kind of guy that, yeah, in dynasty, I don't think you're going to have to pay a ton for him. He's a backup tight end on his own team, for crying out loud. So I think you can find him either, on the wire or cheap from somebody else. I don't think you're going to have to pay a ton for him, but he's the kind of guy that I think can pay off, especially if you have not spent the high draft picks on the Bowerses and the Laportas and those kinds of guys lately. Dan, you look like you want to say something.
No, not at all. I totally agree.
Yeah. I think we're all on board with this one. This is like, he's someone where once I started really digging into it, I was like, he could genuinely has all the key indicators you would look for the type of guy we want to go find this part of the season, where it's someone who, the narrative hasn't quite caught up to yet. It's some like Malik Willis and Flournoy and even Vele to an extent. Like, there's narratives that exist around them already. Like,
and the thing that I like about Dulcich too is that the usage that he did get, I mean, we saw them willing to go to him in high pressure, gotta have it type situations. It wasn't like he was just getting some targets on, second down in the first quarter with nobody giving a damn about what happens in the game. They were going to him in their hurry up offense, in their gotta have it situations. They were willing to look his way and throw the ball his way. And I like that a lot. And Darren Waller, I know Darren Waller was kind of a fun story when he was on the field this season, but Darren Waller is 137 years old and is not going to, last forever. Yeah, Dulcich is the kind of guy to take a shot on in Dynasty.
All right. On to our next tight end. In a situation that it will pull at the heartstrings of many Swifties. I think good chance we saw the end of Kelsey. Never say never. We'll see it when we see it, but good chance. And that kind of leaves us with what fills that void. Is it just all right? Like, that underneath is officially Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. And if I was a betting man, I would admittedly, I'll come out and I'm not going to bury the lead. I think that's the betting thing that happens. But there's a world where someone at the tight end position does have relevance. I mean, Mahomes is used to throwing to his tight end quite a bit over his entire NFL career. So it's worth at least having the conversation. Now, Noah Gray is the name that I put here, but it's kind of just like maybe they draft someone and that guy will get hyped if they draft someone. Like, we can pencil that in. Like, that's not like an under the radar thing, but do one of the guys on this roster now have a chance? And Noah Gray would probably be the lead there. But I mean, we'll throw in the names Jared Wiley and Robert Tonyan too, of guys who are there. Your former Packer, by the way, and Tonyan. But guys who could not fill that void. None of these guys are even going to be close to what Travis Kelce even was this season. But can they sneak tight end 12 finishes or be bye-week starters or be guys who go on a run that you can then sell? Can they make it to there, which I think is where the conversation ultimately actually exists, not are they going to be, the tight end 5 or whatever Kelce ended up finishing as. So Chase, what do you think about these guys? If any of them were to be a guy you'd be interested in, who would it be? And then, of course, is that even reality?
Yeah, I mean, Noah Gray is a guy that has kind of been rostered in Dynasty because of the idea that, like you brought up, it's a team that we know likes to go to their tight end, but they like to go to their tight end. Do they like to go to their tight end because they like to go to the tight end, or do they like to go to the tight end because they've got Travis Kelce, who's an all-world, all-universe, all-time tight end? It kind of feels more like the latter to me necessarily. They do like to throw underneath. And I think they have better options currently on the team than whoever is behind Travis Kelce. That said, I mean, I liked Wiley a little in the draft process. I kind of liked him as a receiver, but this is a team that, how awesome would this team have looked for the future if they had been the ones to draft like a Gadsden or a Fannin or somebody else when we had receiving options available and you knew Travis Kelce was going to ride off into the sunset with Taylor Swift some point soon. There's nobody on this team that excites me right now behind him. If I had to maybe take a dynasty flyer on somebody, I think you can get Wiley for literally nothing. And I liked him in the draft process, but that's about as far as my endorsement of the tight end position sans Travis Kelce is going to go in Kansas City.
Yeah, that's really fair. And I think you bring up the draft class part of it. And let's just throw it out there now. Outside of if you like the upside of Sadiq, this isn't going to be a deep tight end draft. Or maybe I should rephrase that. Deep, sure. There will be a lot of okay guys. But this isn't like a class where there's a lot of guys who are going to come out and immediately be good. At least
this isn't going to be Upland, Warren, Fannin, Gadsden.
Exactly. Again, Sadiq has some upside and we'll get there. And I haven't done a full evaluation on him yet personally, but there will be a conversation with him in the first round. After that, mid rounds might be packed, but there's not going to be expected in instant impact guys. I don't think, at least currently. So it's interesting because there's maybe not a lot of opportunity to replace these guys. So Dan, go ahead.
Well, I think you said it best to start off. Rashee Rice is going to be the new Travis Kelce as far as operating the short area, middle part of the field. That they already started doing that, and Travis Kelce wasn't even gone yet. So it's clear that they're kind of substituting him for that position. Therefore, I don't know how much it matters who that tight end's going to be. I do think it will be starter Noah Gray because I don't think the Chiefs are going to bother spending resources. You would talk about teams in cap hell. They need Travis Kelce to retire. They are $43 million over the cap heading into 2026. They have some serious wiggle waggle that they're going to have to pull off just to get to, even, let alone have the resources to pull in more assets, which of course they'll get to that point at some point, but they're not going to have room for much. So I fully anticipate Travis Kelce retiring. I fully anticipate Noah Gray being the starter, and I fully anticipate him being tight end 20 on the year. We don't have a big sample of Noah Gray ultimately, right? We at no point during this season did he play more than 58% of the routes. And that was by far the highest that he had for the year. We don't have a big sample because Travis Kelce has stayed healthy over the years for the large part, even though he's been, out there every single game and making all kinds of plays. He's been a model of consistency and health, and it's been awesome for him. But at the same time, it means we haven't really seen what Noah Gray could truly do in a spot start situation, what he could do as the guy. Ultimately, he's not crazily on my radar. Is he worth a flyer? Sure. With Mahomes, I guess anybody is to a point. I think we kind of have to start coming off the whole everybody's a conversation with Mahomes, because that really has not been true for a while now. Mahomes hasn't really been Mahomes since 2022. Now, this year he had a little bit of a rebound as far as fantasy football purposes are concerned. But basically what it boils down to is that he has target consolidation when his big horses are on the field. And if not, everybody gets a little sprinkle, and that's the end of it. Noah Gray's not going to be one of his big horses going into next year.
And his fantasy rebound year just happened to coincide with their worst year as a team in terms of on the field product. Do we necessarily think that they're going to try and continue
that has more to do
operating
with
as they have?
Game, but that's I don't think that had anything to do with that. There was a team that was one dimensional from the get go, and they fell behind as a result to that. If they get that's where the resources are going to go. Whatever running back the Chiefs wind up this year, that's who I'm going to care about. Just on the side note, because that's what's going to have to get addressed 100%. But as far as Noah Gray goes, I mean, I have a bunch of tight ends on my dynasty rosters because one may hit for a few weeks, and you kind of have to plug and play. It's hard to get tight ends.
It's a streaky position.
It is. It's hard to get tight ends if you don't have one. So,
which is why, from a philosophical standpoint, and this might be a conversation for later in the offseason, but which is why I have tended to spend high rookie draft capital on guys like the Laportas, the Warrens, the Bowers, going back, and McBride. I have McBride all over the place, and it looks great now. I felt good about it at the time. Wasn't looking great for a year or two there, but looks great now because I've tended to spend high draft capital on tight ends, because once you get that out of the way, you don't have to worry about it then for 8 years. If you can get one of those kind of guys, so awesome. And now you can worry about the rest of your roster. But I digress.
100%. All right. We can hit on one more guy here, and it really a combination of guys. Dan, tell us about your RB2 situation. I'm just going to kind of leave it there. Well, I'll give a little bit of introduction, but I want to know about your RB2 situation from your perspective without leading you too much. But I'm just going to throw the information out there. Brian Robinson, contract year, could very well be gone. Don't know if he's worth the resources to bring back. Wasn't anything special for you. Did trade for him, so there's some interest. So that is a viable option that they just bring him back. Other option, Guerendo was really good last year when he played, and there's some interesting things there. I mean, he was a 5 yards per carry running back as a rookie. Got 0 attempts this year. None. And the last 3 weeks, and that's why this is the guy that I listed, but I want to talk about the room as a whole. But Jordan James was the guy ahead of Guerendo playing, and not playing much, to be clear, but playing the last 3 games of the season. So I kick it to our resident. I started the show kicking it to our resident Packers fan, and I finish kicking it to our resident Niners fan. What's going on with your RB2? Because historically, you roster the running back behind Christian McCaffrey. You have to.
Yeah, the problem is that running back changes every single year, and there's a reason for that. Shanahan can't help himself but to draft one in either the 3rd or the 4th round every single draft, and that very well may happen again this season. So when I look at you, ask me who the RB2 is, I don't know. Ask me in April, because it could very well just be somebody that's completely and utterly not on this list to begin with. Why Guerendo got sent to the doghouse after being explosive and productive when they needed him to be last season, I have no idea. I get on special teams. He had a couple of bad muff kicks. Okay, fine. Sky Moore is a Pro Bowler as a kick returner. Fine, whatever. I get it. For an offense that for the large part of the year, and even towards the end to some degree, that has struggled with getting explosive plays, your most explosive offensive player, arguably, still can't see the field. Why? I couldn't tell you. Shanahan sometimes just gets a bee in his bonnet, and some guy gets grounded, and we never really find out exactly as why that is. But that's what happened to Guerendo. So Jordan James was ahead of him. To your point, they did trade for Brian Robinson. If Brian Robinson can be had for $2.5 million or less, they will bring back Ryan Robinson. I do think there's a strong chance that could be the case. Because if you look back last year, everybody knew the Commanders were going to be looking to cut Brian Robinson, this and that. The 49ers gave up a 7th round draft pick. Nobody wanted him. Nobody really wanted him. So I don't know if that's changed after a season of him not doing much. And while he didn't do much, it was pretty clear all season long the 49ers actually really liked having Brian Robinson as a backup to Christian McCaffrey. Now, I don't really love his fit. I think our team is better fit for a running back with some pop in their speed, but they like the bigger guy. They had a Jordan Mason type. Now they have a Brian Robinson. They seem to like having that type of guy around, even though Shanahan's seen his offense has never been better with a Christian McCaffrey type, a guy who in his prime is explosive and can catch the ball. Brian Robinson's not one of those things, but he still seems to like having those guys around for whatever the case may be. But the fact is that with Jordan James being a day 3 pick who never got to do anything, he very easily could get replaced by the next day 3 pick that the 49ers inevitably will take this spring. So what's happening with RB2? Ask me in May.
Even that could be a toss-up because they've been known to draft that guy in the 4th and then have him cut by the time we hit week 1. So just,
I want to push back a little bit. And I mean, was he anything special? No. But Robinson did average more per rush than McCaffrey did on a per rush basis. And it was his best season on a per rush basis. He averaged 4.3 yards a carry, which isn't great, but as far as a backup running back, if you've got Brian Robinson as your backup, that's a decent situation to have for a backup running back. And I, like you said, Dan, if they can bring him back for not a ton of money, do we think he's getting starting looks anywhere else? Where in the
try to.
He's
whether or not that works is like,
will he
whatever.
Get the looks elsewhere is what I'm saying. But yeah, the whole idea of trying to divine the 49ers running back 2 situation right now, when literally Kyle Juszczyk had 2 carries on the season, and that was 2 more than Guerrero and Jordan James had combined. There's no way to look into that crystal ball. I'm still a Guerrero guy, being a former Badger. Or Guerrero, I should say, guy. He's kind of near and dear to my heart, but I agree with you, Dan. It's just bizarre that they refuse to actually give him a look on anything except for covering punts and stuff.
Yeah, it's a bizarro situation you always have in your backfield. All right, I just want to cross this name off the list. We can go through it quick, and we should go through it quick. Woody Marks is a guy who was fantasy relevant for a good period of this season. He was hurt in either every game or almost every game. He was inefficient. He did not have a great draft profile, and he was drafted late. He is someone who currently, right this minute, can be traded in Dynasty, does have value. Is this a guy who you are trying to sell a falling stock, or are you holding on to him?
Dameon Pierce.
He's better than Dameon Pierce.
Better than Dameon Pierce, but it's the same
bar.
It's a low,
low bar. He's better than Dameon Pierce because he's a better receiving back out of the backfield. So this is the notes that I have. Limitations painfully obvious, right? And you talked about it, the inefficiencies, injury issues, all that stuff. But he played well enough where it's been clear to me that the coaching staff of the Houston Texans likes Woody Marks. And you got some guys that are from San Francisco. They like their little nitty gritty, grind them out, dirty work type of running backs. And he's that type of dude. And the other part of this is that he didn't get to do what he does best, which was what baffled my mind in the first place. They didn't really utilize him as receiving back. That I think he could be very solid at. So I think at the very least, he's going to be part of a committee going into next season. Talk about resources and teams. Like all of the resources that the Texans have need to go to offensive line. Draft, free agency, everything. They only have about projected $13 million in cap space. They're not going to have a ton of room to work with. I don't think a running back is going to be a high priority on their list. It could be a veteran, a cheap veteran, like they kind of try to do with Nick Chubb, or it could be a day 3 draft pick. I think there's a real scenario here where Woody Marks is going to be hanging around in that top 36 running back range next season. So therefore, he has legitimate value. Would I probably prefer to move off of him? Yeah, but he's kind of one of those weird players where I don't know if you're going to get more value for him than what he's actually worth. And if you're in a situation where you kind of need that spot start RB2 or that extra little flex play to just give you a baseline floor, I think Woody Marks actually can be that guy to some degree. So I'm looking at this like I would need like a 2nd round pick, I think, out of Woody Marks to make it worth it, because he's not really worth it for a 3rd round rookie draft pick, frankly, with the role that I very clearly see getting laid out for him for at least another year.
It sucks for a guy who can't stay healthy, but I mean, speaking of guys on the Texans who are volume type plays, I mean, Joe Mixon has made a career out of being a volume guy. Woody Marks,
different scenario. Joe Mixon, much higher draft
He was a much higher draft pick, but he has never done anything in his career outside of being a volume guy.
Outside of being a multi-year top 5 fantasy football running back. And that was more than
because of volume, though.
It was more than just volume.
No, it wasn't.
It was. Touchdowns are a big thing. Woody Marks has not shown. I mean, he's a rookie, but he has not shown that he can score touchdowns the way Joe Mixon did. Joe Mixon's like Kyron Williams. Like, I don't think there's anything special about Kyron Williams, but the guy knows how to finish. It was the same thing with Joe Mixon. Because he knew how to finish, he just kept getting that job over and over again.
Okay. We can maybe agree to disagree on Joe Mixon's being anything. I mean, he was on a great offense for his entire career and just kept getting handed the football despite the fact that he could barely fall forward for his own body length. And
I mean, in fairness, how many years did he spend on an offensive line outside of the bottom 8?
And what did we just talk about with the Houston Texans too on their offensive line? And
it's bad. Yeah. No disagreement there.
Woody Marks has to stay healthy. Whether he's a volume back or a special back, he still has to stay healthy. Like you said, Dan, he's hurt every 13 minutes of game time. And so what do you if you can't keep him on the field, you can't keep him on the field, whether you want to hand in the ball or not. But I mean, yeah, he's not anything special, but he is on a decent offense that wants to use him when he's available. So yeah, I agree with you, Dan, that I'm not looking to get out from underneath him, and I'm especially not going to just throw him away at the first offer that comes my way. I want to make sure that I'm getting something for him, regardless of what my situation is with my roster.
All right. Well, that fulfills my list. Dan, you got anything to close us out?
Well, with that, you're going to get more of this type of action as we move through, getting you guys ready for the Senior Bowl, the Combine, the offseason, and of course, the NFL Draft. So tune in to Operation Domination, download your favorite podcast app, check out our video content in the Fantasy Football Advice Network at YouTube at FF Advice Net. It's going to be more DFS throughout the playoffs, more Dynasty talk, and I'll be getting with Chaz Filardi of Sports Betting Weekly tomorrow to talk about our best bets of the wild card round. So make sure you tune into that to line your pockets green. And with that, we'll see you guys real soon.